The next type of market distortion caused by the government that we'll explore is something called a price floor. Okay, so it's opposite of a price ceiling. It's opposite of a price ceiling. And a price floor is simply a price below which no one is allowed to charge. Okay, and like a price ceiling, a price floor would be an instance whereby the government thinks that the market clearing price for whatever product it is too low, and this type of government interference, price ceiling, that type of government interference is mostly to benefit the consumer. That would be the argument, even though it causes a huge inefficiency in the market and it doesn't actually benefit the consumer at all. The argument would be is that a price ceiling is there to benefit the consumer. Price floor is the opposite. Price floor is there to benefit the producer of a product. Government thinks that at the current market price, the producer can't survive. The producer is in some sense integral to society. They don't want the producer to go out of business, so they support the price at a level above equilibrium price. There are two common types of price floor, and one we all know very well, and that is the minimum wage. Okay, simply a wage below which no one's allowed to pay. So let's graph the labor market for a second, see what effect the minimum wage has on this market. So what we're going to have now, I got to explain this graph to you a little bit. On the horizontal axis, we're going to have the quantity of labor. Okay, so that Q is specifically the quantity of labor. On the vertical axis, we're going to have the price of labor, which is the wage. Now we have a supply of labor, okay, and we have a demand for labor, okay. Now the supply of labor, on a regular market, the supply curve is the firm, and so when we're thinking about supply in a regular market, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of a firm. But in the labor market, okay, the supply of labor is us, employees. Okay, the demand for labor is the firm. Okay, so what's lying behind the demand curve for labor is the firm. Now, normally, this market would equilibrate at some wage. Okay, and since we're going to be talking about the minimum wage here, we have to qualify this labor market as a low or no skilled labor market, and that market would normally equilibrate at some wage, okay, and there would be some quantity of labor traded at that equilibrium wage. And let's just say that no skill labor market wage, let's just say it would typically equilibrate, say, at $6.50 an hour. Okay, now at $6.50 an hour, quantity supplied of labor equals quantity demanded. Everybody who wants a job at that wage gets it. And as you can see, the firm's surplus, okay, which is now this upper triangle here, and labor's surplus, okay, the employee's surplus, which is this bottom triangle here, though the sum of those two areas is as big as it can be. In other words, society is happiest, the market is fully efficient at $6.50 an hour for the labor market that consists of very little or no skilled labor. Okay, now the government thinks that $6.50 an hour isn't a living wage, whatever that means, and so they come in and impose a minimum wage, say at $8 an hour. Okay, That is their minimum wage. Now, at this high of a wage, according to the law of demand, quantity demanded of labor is going to fall. At that high of a wage, in other words, firms aren't going to want to hire as many people. So that is going to be the quantity traded of labor in this no-skilled labor market. But at that high of a wage, people are willing to come out of the woodwork to work. In other words, quantity supplied of labor will increase. Okay, so that's the quantity supplied of labor at $8 an hour. What do we have here? We have a surplus of labor. Okay, so whereas before, if the market was allowed to equilibrate at W star, you wouldn't have a line at your unemployment office. Okay, there would be nobody waiting in line and every morning waiting for the doors to open to check want ads on computers, etc., to see if any job openings have occurred overnight. But at $8 an hour, at that minimum wage, you get exactly that. You now get unemployment in the no-skilled labor market, and you get a line forming at the unemployment office. Okay, this is a surplus of labor, but it is unemployment. Okay, now question here is, what effect does that have on total surplus in this market? Well, let's look at it this way. So you've got a surplus of labor. Okay, you're going, you don't have a job. You're going to the unemployment office every day. There's a big long line there of people waiting for job openings to come about, etc. You didn't have to deal with that before, but now you have to deal with that. Furthermore, you're spending time going to get newspapers, reading through newspapers, going to interviews that you may or may not get, and it's just you're wasting a lot of time. So assume that you're waiting in line at the unemployment office, and a guy pulls up in a pickup truck and says, "Look, I've got a job that I need done today, and everyone who wants to work in that job, jump in the back of the truck and we'll go do it." Well, your first word out of your mouth is, "Well, how much are you paying?" And the guy goes, "Well, how much are you willing to take?" So how much are you willing to take? Well, you're willing to take your marginal cost of working that day, which is that distance there. In other words, you're willing to be paid what's called a reservation wage of, say, $5 an hour just to get some work that day. Okay, so you'll jump in the back of the truck for $5 an hour cash money. Okay. Um, uh, 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 what does this mean? Well, it means it shrinks consumer and producer surplus. It shrinks worker surplus to this much, and firm surplus to this much, meaning that total surplus is obviously not maximized. Furthermore, this area here, that area there, is the black market premium, so to speak, for labor. You can think of this as that guy's going to get $8 an hour worth of labor out of you, but he's only going to pay you $5 an hour. So he's making money off of you, hiring you in the under the table on the black market, so to speak. But furthermore, that is the opportunity cost of dealing with increased job search. Okay, increased job search activity. Why? Because you didn't have to look for a job before. If you quit, you could go right to a guy down the street and they'd hire you, no problem. If you quit at Burger King, you could go to McDonald's and they'd hire you the second you quit from Burger King. You can't do that now. You're spending increased activity looking for work. Why? Because there's unemployment due to the minimum wage. Okay? Now, obviously, we have a deadweight loss in this market as well. Okay? Now, that deadweight loss, what is that? How would we interpret that deadweight loss? Well, you have people who are idle. Uh, um, um, people who aren't doing much tend to partake in activity that is not always the best activity. For instance, you have no job, you have no income. What do? Pick up a gun and go rob a store. Right? I mean, so why? Because there would normally be Q star people employed, but now only QT are employed. So there's people who are sitting around doing nothing, and they partake in activity that is not the best of activity to engage in. But furthermore, you got to figure this dead weight loss also includes child support not getting paid by individuals who are not working. You probably get a rise. You get a rise in crime. You'll get an increase in non-payment of child support. You'll probably get an increase in divorce rates, etc., etc. Everything that comes with higher unemployment in the no-skilled labor force. Okay, so bottom line is, imposing a minimum wage on a market is not efficient. Now, having said that, we're going to look at a situation in the next video whereby it's more efficient or excuse me, has less of a negative impact in one market than it would another market.